our next session is about pension arrangements for supply teachers, where we're up to at the moment. Uh, so Dave Wilkinson, our national negotiating official, is going to be discussing that with you. Introduce yourself, Dave, and we will progress.
Thanks a lot, Wayne, and thanks a lot, colleagues, for indicating that you want to come to this session. As Wayne has said, my name is Dave Wilkinson. I'm the union's pensions policy lead and national negotiating official, and I'm going to run through some of the key pensions issues for supply teachers. I'll start off by saying that what we can't do as a union is to provide pensions advice. That has to be done by a financial advisor, a regulated financial advisor, preferably an independent financial advisor. That's so if you've got any questions about your own pension situation, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to answer them in all likelihood. What I am going to do, though, is to run through the key policy issues and campaigning issues around supply teachers and pensions, and hopefully you'll find that helpful. Just to say that we see the issue of supply teachers and pensions and their pensions as an equalities issue. It is fundamentally an equalities issue. And we are absolutely fully aware of the inequalities that are out there in the system. And I'll just run through some of those inequalities that you know better than me, colleagues, because you suffer them. Pension provision is extremely unequal in the UK for working people, and the key factors that influence that are set out there: gender, ethnicity, earnings, age, disability. Now, these are factors which obviously are sometimes lead teachers to be supply teachers. So, for example, disability which prevents teachers from holding permanent full-time work in order to manage sickness and disability, as well as securing some income, is what leads teachers to become supply teachers. And we are fully aware of that our supply teacher members share and have a large number of protected characteristics from the Equality Act. The type of occupational pension scheme that a worker has, whether they're in a public service pension scheme, a defined benefit pension scheme, such as the teachers' pension scheme, or whether they're in a defined contribution scheme, where the value of that can go down as well as up. Generally speaking, employers pay a far lower contribution into it than they do into the teachers' pension scheme. That has a very, very big impact in terms of pensions equality. And as well as that, there's inequality in state pension provision. And particularly for teachers who have either retired in recent years or will be retiring very shortly, if they have had time out of employment, frequently for reasons to do with raising a family, for example, or just simply not being able to secure employment, then that can lead to them having a lower state pension than the full state pension. So there's inequality in state pension provision as well. Now, we are absolutely fully aware, and I'll come on to this later, of the issues in England specifically, although to a certain extent in Wales as well, around agency teachers. That agency teachers are unable in many circumstances to join the teachers' pension scheme, find that route completely closed to them. And I'll run through the campaigning and the political actions that we're taking to try to get that situation changed. And for many of our supply teachers, we are fully aware that they are in defined contribution pension schemes. They lack certainty over pension benefits. And I'll just give some examples of the differences between the teachers' pension scheme and defined contribution schemes in a second. And it's a really important priority for us as a union to secure the interests of our members who are denied access to the teachers' pension scheme. And we do involve ourselves with defined contribution pension schemes in order to try to secure the best for our members who are enrolled in those schemes. Just to give you some information about the teachers' pension scheme, if you're not aware of that, it's got 2.3 million members. It's got this is across the UK, so there's three pension schemes. There's the England and Wales scheme, there's the Scottish Teachers Pension Scheme, and there's the Northern Ireland Teachers Pension Scheme. If you add all the number of all the members together, that's serving teacher members, that's members like me. I'm a pensioner. I've been taking my pension now for a year and a half from Teachers Pension Scheme. And also people who have stopped teaching but haven't yet reached their pension age and started taking their pension. And across the three schemes, it comes to 2.3 million members. And the amount that's in the teachers' pension schemes across the UK is well over well over 200 billion pounds. Now, all state-funded schools, colleges, post-92 universities have to enrol their teachers and lecturers. Independent schools participate voluntarily as accepted bodies, and one of our big campaigns at the moment, and that's an industrial action campaign in many circumstances, is to keep teachers in independent schools in the teachers' pension scheme when their school threatens to take them out or to reduce their salaries if they stay in the teachers' pension scheme. There is absolute certainty over pension benefits in the teachers' pension scheme. So if you register with My Pension Online, you get a forecast telling you what your pension will be in today's money when you reach your minimum pension age and at ages above that, and that is absolutely paid out. That's paid out, guaranteed 100% by the government. Paid for life. There's no need for women to have higher pension savings than men, which is something that we read a lot in the financial papers, the financial pages of the broadsheets, for example, or in the pensions press, because women have higher life expectancy, they have to have a higher pension pot. That's not the case in the teachers' pension scheme. Irrespective of your life expectancy, it pays out guaranteed certain pension for life. And it's inflation linked, and that's absolutely crucial, and particularly brought home to us, colleagues, in the last 4 years, when inflation 2 years ago climbed to 12%, how valuable it is, how incredibly valuable it is to have a pension scheme which is inflation linked. And that little graphic there shows you how the teacher's pension grows each year in value. It's revalued by inflation plus 1.6% for serving teachers. For people, for deferred members who aren't paying into the scheme, it's revalued by inflation, and it's completely index linked as well when it's taken. So if you are a pensioner, then your pension goes up every year by inflation. Now, what I've done there is just to quote from a financial journalist called Lauren Almeida. I've included a couple of quotes from her. She writes in the Telegraph, she's not a particular fan of public service pensions, including the teachers' pension scheme, because she sees them as being gold-plated. But what she did when she wrote 2 years ago, during a period of very high inflation, was to say retired public sector workers are to be handed their biggest pay rise in decades, while pensioners who worked in the private sector will see their real income eaten up by inflation. Private company pension savings that offer no protection against inflation have been devalued by rocketing prices and struggling stock markets. And those are what defined contribution pensions were delivering at that time. They were falling in value, and even if they didn't fall in cash terms, they were generally not keeping pace with inflation. Whereas teacher pensioners in April 2023 got 10.1%, a 10.1% increase in their pension, and serving teachers that were in the teachers' pension scheme saw their pension pot increased by 11.7% by inflation plus 1.6%. And a year later, she wrote again, Lauren Almeida, to draw attention to, I don't know if you remember the very short-lived Liz Truss quasi-quartern government, which nearly collapsed the UK economy in 6 weeks, forcing the Bank of England to intervene to buy government bonds. And that led to another crisis in the pensions industry, which saw private pensions and defined contribution pensions fallen considerably in value. But the teachers' pension scheme was completely immune from that. And to use the pensions jargon, geopolitical events in recent years have had a devastating, catastrophic effect on a lot of pension savings, from the coronavirus pandemic to the dreadful wars that are taking place at the moment across the world, in the Middle East and in the Ukraine. The most tragic aspect of which is the dreadful and harrowing loss of life, particularly civilian life, of course, but it does have an enormously devastating economic impact on stock markets, on, say, on pension funds as well. And the teachers' pension scheme is immune from that, always increases by inflation, has got 100% government guarantee over it. Now, so what is it within the teachers' pension scheme first which leads to inequality? And this applies to supply teachers particularly as well. One is unequal earnings. In our scheme, the teachers' pension scheme, basically, the lower you pay, the lower your pension. In addition to that, teachers with lower earnings are going to be less likely to afford to purchase scheme flexibilities, such as additional pension or faster accrual, so your pension grows more quickly, or defined contribution products like teachers' additional voluntary contribution pensions. As well as that, there's what's called a disqualifying break in the teachers' pension scheme. And if you leave pensionable service for 5 years or longer, what it means is that you get a less generous indexation of your pension. It still increases by inflation, but it doesn't increase by inflation plus 1.6%. And that hits teachers who take longer career breaks, or teachers who find that they can't get access to the teachers' pension scheme because they're supply teachers and they're employed by an employment agency which isn't in the teachers' pension scheme. So that's discriminatory, and we've been campaigning ever since that disqualifying break was introduced. We've been campaigning to have that removed. Women often have shorter service than men anyway, frequently because of career breaks, reducing their hours to part-time working, which reduces length of service. The final salary factor is full-time equivalent, so it doesn't have an impact on that, which is good. We've successfully negotiated that, but it does reduce the number of days that you're employed as a teacher over your career, and that has an impact on pension accrual. And individual opt-outs from the teachers' pension scheme as well, because teachers are suffering the effects of the economic crisis and find it difficult to make ends meet. That has an impact, of course, on pension accrual, and so does employer withdrawal for those teachers that are in the independent school sector. Right, so what are we doing about that then? Well, I mean, in terms of what we're doing about the agency issue, and I'll just make it clear, if we've got members who are teachers in Scotland, supply teachers in Scotland, or substitute teachers in Northern Ireland, all supply teachers in Scotland are in the Scottish Teachers Pension Scheme. All supply teachers in Scotland are employed by local authorities, enjoy the benefit of national paying conditions, are employed in accordance with what's called the SNCT handbook, and SNCT pay scales, which the rest of the teaching profession enjoys, and all are enrolled in the Scottish Teachers Pension Scheme. And in Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Substitute Teacher Register enrolls its teachers in the Northern Ireland Teachers Pension Scheme. So we don't have this problem in Scotland and Northern Ireland. We have it in England because of the prevalence of agencies as the means by which employers engage supply teachers. And the central weakness of the agency workers regulations around pensions is that pensions are not included in them as a term and condition, a term or condition which needs to be comparable after 12 weeks. So even though we want the agency workers regulations to give rights to be treated as a comparable worker, somebody who's a full-time, not necessarily full-time, but somebody who's a permanent employee from the first day of employment, at the moment, even if that happened, it wouldn't benefit our supply teacher members who work for agencies as far as their pensions are concerned, because pensions are not included. It's pay, working hours, holidays, but not pensions that are included in the agency workers regulations. So they need to be changed. There needs to be a change in the law to improve them. Now, the Teachers Pension Scheme regulations and the auto-enrolment regulations, which govern the enrolment of all workers in the occupational pension scheme, need to be amended to ensure that agencies have to auto-enrol all teachers in the Teachers Pension Scheme. Simple and straightforward as that. So in exactly the same way as state-funded schools, colleges, post-92 universities, etc., have to enrol all their teachers in the Teachers Pension Scheme, agencies should have to as well. And our sister unions in the TUC share that campaign if they have members in other public service schemes, like, for example, the NHS scheme or the civil service scheme. It's across the trade union movement. We want the law to be changed. Are we close to getting that? No, we're not, I'm afraid. And it's not through want of trying, because we have been campaigning on this and we have been lobbying government on this for a very long time, but we got absolutely nowhere with the Tories, and before them with the coalition. We will now be having those discussions with the Labour government, and it's an indication of how important our national executive, and you'll know that obviously Wayne is senior vice president, member of the national executive, National Officers Committee. And it's excellent, of course, that he's come tonight today, sorry, to chair this. But it's a major, it's an indication of how important the National Executive regards this, that the Teachers Manifesto, which we published leading up to the general election, it included the demand that all supply teachers have access to the Teachers Pension Scheme. They should be enrolled in it, and if they want to opt out individually because they don't want to be in it, that's fine, that's up to them, but they should be enrolled in it, and they should have access to it. And we'll be continuing to take that forward through social partnership with the new government. Just to go back to the earnings issue, this graph, and I appreciate that this is data now which is several years out of date, and the reason for that is that we had this produced for us by Warwick University when we had a contract with them, where they analysed for us the DFE school workforce census, so the pay of nearly 500,000 teachers in England. So this is England only, but there's no reason to believe that Wales particularly isn't any different, is radically different to this. And what they did was they looked at the equalities issues around teachers' pay, and they produced this for us, this analysis that shows, for example, that when teachers are in their 20s, women's earnings relative to men are actually, in 2012 and 2013, were actually slightly above male earnings when teachers were in their 20s. So women teachers were holding their own against male teachers when it came to their pay, and also slightly higher in 2015 as well. However, once women get into their 30s, then you can see how women's earnings substantially fall. So it's there at around 0.92% of average male earnings, female earnings, falling actually by 2015. The situation gets worse between 2010 and 2015. So by 2015, women in their 30s are earning 90% of what men in their 30s are earning. And it falls even further when women get into their 40s. It doesn't really recover at all, because all ages if you take all teachers of all ages together, you can see there, for example, that female earnings are bumping along at around just over 0.85, 85%, I should say, of male earnings. Now, that is a scandalous situation, isn't it? Even if we don't think about the impact on pensions, that's a scandalous situation. The level of that gender pay gap is appalling and scandalous, and it needs to be completely rectified so that there isn't a gender pay gap. But as well as having a pay gap, it leads to a pensions gap, because in the teachers' pension scheme, obviously, the lower pay leads to lower pension. So that's one of the main contributory factors in the teachers' pension scheme to the gender pensions gap. Sorry, it should be moving now. We a couple of years ago, the DfE carried out an analysis of performance-related pay progression, eventually, after being asked by the School Teachers Review Body to do it for several years. And we'd been asking the School Teachers Review Body to ask the DfE for several years as well. So because of our campaign that we did this eventually. And that also revealed, again, an analysis of all teachers in England, the scandalous situation to do with pay progression. Now, it's excellent news, although it still doesn't go far enough at the moment, that the government has removed, eventually, after years of campaigning on our part, has eventually removed the mandatory requirement for local authority maintained schools to have performance-related pay. We'd successfully managed to get it removed from some large academy employers anyway, but it's excellent that it's now going to be removed as a mandatory requirement from the school teachers' pay and conditions document, with the exception of the threshold, which will remain for the moment. Now, the threshold has a severe discriminatory impact. It's one of the main causes, actually, of the gender pay gap because of the disparity in pay progression rates, threshold progression rates between the primary phase and the secondary phase in particular. And also, we have a far higher number of primary teachers who decide just not to apply for the threshold at all because they're told that if they go onto the upper pay scale, then they have to carry out additional duties. So they self-select and decide that they don't want the additional workload associated with that and just don't even apply. So their pay is capped effectively at the M6 level. But it's worse for women than for men. Rates of pay progression have been consistently lower since 2010 for women than for men. And for part-time teachers, it's a lot lower than for full-time teachers. And part-time working is a proxy for gender. There's no question about that. Women are disproportionately present within the part-time teacher cohort. So you can see there how that discrimination plays out. And the DfE had to conclude itself when it carried out its own analysis that the drop was especially marked for part-time teachers. Pay progression rates for women school leaders have fallen behind that of men. And that's happened since performance-related pay was introduced onto the leadership scales. Pay progression rates for Black and Black British and Asian British full-time teachers are lower than for white teachers. Again, this is the DfE's own analysis of 12 years worth of pay progression. Disgracefully, pay progression rates for teachers with disabilities are much lower than for teachers without disabilities. And that includes threshold progression. Success rates for older teachers, and that's defined as teachers that are over 50, for those teachers who haven't yet reached the upper pay scale if they're over 50. Success rates for older teachers are lower than for younger teachers. And for part-time teachers, only 25% of younger part-time teachers achieve threshold progression to the upper pay range. It's even lower for older part-time teachers. What a disgraceful discriminatory pay point the threshold is. And that's why the National Executive decided in October 2021 that our policy is to have a single classroom teacher pay scale in England and Wales in the same way as there is in Scotland, and that there should be no threshold between the upper pay scale and the lower pay scale. All teachers should be able to access progression on an automatic annual basis up to the top of what's now the upper pay scale as part of a single classroom teacher pay scale. So what are our campaigning priorities in addition to the campaigning around agencies, and how would that benefit supply teachers? We want to remove the gender, ethnicity and disability pay gaps in teaching completely. in the way that I've outlined, by having the single scale and time served annual pay progression, which is automatic. We want the 5-year disqualifying break, which impacts in a discriminatory fashion on women teachers and supply teachers as well, who both male and female, who can't access the TPS when they're working for agencies. We want the auto-enrolment legislation, teachers' pension scheme regulations amending, as I said earlier, so that all teachers have to be enrolled in the teachers' pension scheme, irrespective of whether they work for an agency or are directly employed by a state-funded school or college. We are campaigning for a duty to be placed on the teachers' pension schemes across the UK to monitor and report opt-outs, broken down into all Equality Act categories, which the DfE has consistently refused to do, on the grounds that it doesn't have a legal responsibility to do it. We've already ensured that employee contributions in the teachers' pension scheme are paid on actual salaries rather than the full-time equivalent. So that benefits part-time teachers, including supply teachers in the teachers' pension scheme, and also the full-time equivalent salary is used to determine the final and average salary in the teachers' pension scheme, which benefits part-time teachers. And for teachers with disabilities, we've ensured that ill health pension benefits for teachers who are medically incapable of working, either as a teacher or at all, are generous. And we've ensured that that is the case, and that teachers who can access ill health pensions receive a pension for life. Just to give you some information across the whole of society, this is absolutely scandalous. Our sister union Prospect does some really excellent work every year on the gender pay gap, which is used not just by us, but by the TUC. Among today's pensioners, women have annual incomes which are 40.5% lower than men. So their pension income is 40.5% lower than male pension income. That's women pensioners. The female pension pot, for example, women's pension pots for those women that are in defined contribution schemes that have a pension pot, it's different than the teachers' pension schemes. Doesn't work like that for us. Their pension pot is far lower, about a third of the male pension pot on average, 51,000, and that's very low. To be honest, 157,000 is a low pension pot. That's a very low pension pot. So you can see there the how the gender pay gap works across society in general. Those workers that aren't in public service pensions, and of course that includes many supply teachers. And in terms of the state pension as well, in 2016, and we actually tried to get the TUC to campaign more on this at the time, and we put information out leading up to the 2015 election, because the legislation had already been passed by the coalition government. One thing which they did, which didn't really get a lot of coverage, I thought, during the general election in 2015, was they made it a lot harder for women to get a full state pension. Because they raised the threshold to get the full state pension in terms of national insurance contributions to 35 years. So women that didn't have that length of service because they've been raising families were hit by that, and many teachers were hit by that. Female teachers were hit by that because there was an impact as well, because our scheme was what was known as contracted out from paying the higher level national insurance contributions. So many of our women members were badly hit by that, and women across the UK were hit by that. And we wanted the TUC to be making more of that leading up to the general election. It didn't really, in my view, make enough of it. And state pension incomes, therefore, aren't projected to be equalised for men and women on retirement until 2041. So that's 17 years to go still until state pension incomes are due to be equalised. Again, ethnic minority people in the UK have far worse and far lower pension provision across society than people who aren't from a minority ethnic background. And as well as that, people with disabilities as well are on track to have a very low retirement income of 11,000 a year compared to 18,000 for people who aren't disabled. And 18,000 is not a high level of pension income anyway. So it is a very unequal picture. What I can assure colleagues of, though, is that what we are doing is campaigning as hard as we can. We are doing that via the TUC to ensure that our policies are taken up by the TUC in the meetings that they have and the discussions that they have with the government, with the new government, with the Treasury and the Department for Work and Pensions in particular. And of course, our General Secretary's team and our national officers who meet with ministers, they raise this with ministers in the DfE as well. And we raise this across all UK nations with the governments that are responsible for supply teachers and substitute teachers. So that's where we are. If you want to kind of assist in this, so to speak, please do, whenever you have a political engagement with your MP, please do raise the situation of supply teachers, specifically agency workers in this country, and the scandalous two-tier workforce that exists in the UK. It's not just within education, it exists across the whole of society. Where I live in Derbyshire, for example, the two biggest employers are the Duke of Devonshire, the Chatsworth Estate, and Rolls-Royce. And a scandalously large number of Rolls-Royce workers are provided by agencies. A two-tier workforce with inferior conditions, and it's not just within the public sector that the agencies are supplying workers, and we won't get a fair and equal society until that discrimination is removed, until that two-tier workforce across the UK is removed. So please do repeatedly remind politicians about this every time you get the opportunity to do so, because that's the key, is the removal of the two-tier workforce to ensuring that our supply teacher members enjoy the same or comparable levels of pension provision to our members who are employed in more secure forms of employment. So that's the end, colleagues, of that. I'm more than happy, obviously, if you've got any questions or observations that you want to make, more than happy, obviously, to answer those. Again, if you do ask an individual pensions question that I'm not able to answer because it would involve giving the provision of financial advice, I apologise for that, but we do have a relationship with Wesleyan, the financial advisor, regulated financial advisor, who is able to provide financial advice free of charge to members. So, but I'll finish there. So thanks a lot, Wayne. That's the end, really.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, we do have some questions. We'll read them out, and I think we one of them. You might just have to say what you've just said then again regarding getting some financial advice elsewhere, but you might be able to put a little spin on it. I think the first one that's been sent in by anonymous attendee, I think you've already answered it during your thing. So if they haven't, I'll read it out. But if they haven't, anonymous attendee, and you want to ask something slightly different, then please go ahead. It just, teachers' pension schemes do not apply to supply teachers. When are this going to change? I think you've covered that in your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. I mean, it'll change when the government changes the law on auto enrolment, on the teachers' pension scheme regulations are changed, and agencies are brought into the agency workers are brought fully into the employment framework with the same rights as workers with more secure employment. That is it's the absolute priority. At least we now have a government that says that it wants to address that. We've not had that for the last 14 years. At least we have now, and that has to be regarded as a step forwards.
Okay. Next one from Deborah White. Any idea which is a better prevention provider, NEST or People's Pension? And can you transfer supply teacher pension pots to teacher pensions, and what are the charges?
Well, I can answer the second one.
Yep.
The first one I can't because it requires a financial advisor to provide
Yeah.
the answer to that. It is possible to transfer a defined contribution pension pot into the teacher's pension scheme if you are in the teacher's pension scheme at the point at which you apply for the transfer. So you have to be a participating member, and the transfer value is issued by the scheme on request to you. So you would have to be a serving teacher then at the time. You would then apply to the teacher's pension scheme, and they would provide you with the transfer value, which would determine the value of the pot that you transfer in essentially into the teacher's pension scheme. That's done by contacting the scheme direct. The first part of your question, you would have to that would have to be Wesleyan or an independent financial advisor that
Yeah.
or another independent
Well,
financial advisor that would answer that, because they'd
yeah.
have to give a comparison of two schemes, the performance of the schemes, and we can't do that as a trade union, I'm afraid.
Next one, Felicity Spence. If my agency hasn't signed me up with a pension, can I ask them to, or do I need to do this myself? I thought it was a requirement that they had to sign you up to a pension pot.
Yes, I mean, unless it's an extremely small agency with virtually no employees. I mean, they should have enrolled you in a workplace pension scheme. So please do contact them and ask them why they haven't done that. I mean the penalties for breach of the auto enrolment regulations are harsh, and they include up to 2 years imprisonment. And chief executives of companies that haven't complied with those regulations have been sent to prison, including. And the reason I know this is because it's a company that's not that far from me in Derby. The chief executive was actually imprisoned for not complying with the regulations. Yeah, please contact them and ask them why you haven't been have you been enrolled in a workplace pension, and if not, then why not? And if they haven't done, then please contact us for assistance through the MSA team advice mailbox, because that is something that we do want to give assistance to our supply teacher members over.
Okay. One that was put into chat. She missed a bit about your 35-year contribution rule. What was the 35 contribution rule about?
Yeah. To get the full level of the state pension, there have to be 35 years national insurance contributions to get the full level of the state pension. This is for teachers who were retiring in 2016, who had teachers' pension scheme service, which was previously known as a contracted out. It was previously a contracted out scheme. Now, going forward, the full state pension, will be available to all workers, but at the moment, there is that 35-year rule, which is hitting some of our members that don't have that 35 years of full national insurance contributions. It is possible to purchase them. You can buy them to take you up to that level. But of course, if you've had breaks in employment, then you might not have the money to be able to afford to do that. So that's a it's a particular problem. It's a discriminatory effect of the 2016 pension reforms, which were enacted by the coalition government, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Paula Murphy. Who would I contact to look at the option to top up my state pension to the single tier after being at stay on for 5 years? So who would be the actual contact for that? What you just mentioned before?
Department for Work and Pensions.
That was very quickly answered.
Yeah.
And the next one from Hilda. What is the difference between defined contributions and defined benefits, please?
Yeah, well, I mean, the answer is that in a defined contribution scheme, the contributions are defined, but not the benefits. And in a defined benefit scheme, the benefits are defined and the contributions are set in order to give that level of benefit. So, for example, in a defined contribution scheme, the pension is invested in stocks and shares, essentially government bonds, etc. And it's then valued at the point at which the pension saver takes it, and the value of it is what delivers the pension. So if it's fallen in value for a particular reason, then it delivers a lower pension than it would have done otherwise. And unfortunately, in recent years, there have been some catastrophic economic circumstances, starting with the pandemic, which saw hundreds of billions, thousands of billions of pounds wiped off pension funds across the world. The terrible wars in the Ukraine, the Middle East, inflation, high inflation, particularly, and energy shortages caused by the war in Ukraine, and also homegrown issues. I'm not making a comment on this, by the way, because we didn't take a view on this as a union. We didn't advise people to vote one way or another in the Brexit referendum, but the fact is that it had an impact on the UK stock. It has had an impact on the UK stock market. It shrunk the UK economy, and all of this has had an impact on pension pots. So a defined contribution pension is far more risky and less secure than a defined benefits one. And that's the key difference. The contribution is defined, which is why employers like it, because they can reduce it easily. Whereas in the teachers' pension scheme, the employer pays the contribution they do in order to give us the benefits that are certain and forecast for us. So
yeah, the next one into question is just something that this anonymous attendee's done. Said, I took a 2-term temporary job just to top up my teacher pension with my savings. It put me in a better position to retire, as I've been a supply teacher for 6 years.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it would. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it would. And yeah, so congratulations on being able to do that. I mean, the key for us is that we want all our supply members to have that access to the TPS, and if you can get direct employment by a school or college that enrolls you in the TPS, then clearly that's one of the benefits of having that direct employment.
Well, there's no more questions. I don't mind finishing a little bit early, so you can get back to watching the football the last 5-10 minutes, probably.
Cheers, Wayne. Thanks for that.
Derby have equalised. I saw earlier, but I
Oh,
don't know what it is.
excellent. Right. Well, I've
I
recorded
don't know
it.
what it is now, though.
Yeah, well, I've recorded it, so I'm going to watch the second
Oh, I
half.
do apologise. I don't.
No, that's okay. No, I'm pleased. I probably would have checked it on my phone anyway, because I
All
would
right.
like to know the current state of play.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do then, because there's no more questions, we will finish there. We will take a little bit of a comfort break till 1:30, and Paul can start 15 minutes earlier. I'm hoping he's ready and he's there. So thanks a lot, Dave. And
Thanks,
we'll
colleagues.
just leave it for a few minutes before we come back with Paul.
Thanks, colleagues. Have
All
a
right.
good rest of the day.